Ever had a splinter in your mouth? You heard me. The FDA says there may be wood in common cheese products.
Brains, brawn, and more brawn. One UNC recruit for 2 varsity sports.
But first, tornado warnings and heavy thunderstorms in our area this week. Weathercaster David Dixon tells us what to expect next. All that and more.
Wake up, Carolina.
From the School of Media and Journalism, bringing you the news to help start your day. This is Wake Up Carolina.
Sirens blared all around campus, telling students to get indoors and stay safe. Good morning, I'm Maddie Gardner.
And I'm CB Cotton. Thanks for joining us on this first edition of Wake Up Carolina. Unusual weather this week brought tornado warnings to Chapel Hill. Weathercaster David Dixon is live in the studio with an update for us. David.
Now, it might be sunny outside right now, but that certainly wasn't the case on Wednesday. And though it might be a few days ago, it's still very fresh on many of our minds as this was a severe event that normally doesn't happen in North Carolina, and I wanted to show you a different view of these. This is from the NASA GOES satellite. So from above, you can see just line after line of storms coming through the same region of central North Carolina. You could actually pick out a few select cells. These are some supercells that cause pretty heavy winds, tornadoes for some of the area. But the main player in this is definitely wind. Wind reports of 122 injuries and 122, and then 30 tornado reports, but only one of those was a tornado confirmed by the National Weather Service. The biggest number I haven't told you, 0 fatalities, which really goes to show just how well the forecasting was. Back to you, CV and Maddie.
Carolina students have been pushing for LGBTQ safe residence halls for years.
Now reporter Madison Cavalcari tells us how they're making that happen.
For first-year Brennan Lewis, a dorm room is home. It's where Lewis gets ready for class, relaxes, and does homework. Hidden around the room are clues to tell you a little more about Lewis.
I identify as genderqueer, which means, for me, it means that presenting as either gender or being identified as either gender makes me really uncomfortable.
Lewis likes the dorm this year, but says the process was stressful.
It's just always something that's on my mind, and I know it's not for a lot of people, so in that way I feel different.
Lewis found a safe place, but says others aren't so lucky. In 2012, efforts to establish LGBTQ housing were focused on gender nonspecific options, meaning a student could live with someone of the opposite sex. The Board of Governors struck down that option in 2013, but Lewis, along with 4 other students, found another way.
Pride Place next year is planned to be on the 2nd floor of Cobb, and I actually already live there, right in the middle, right up there.
That's first-year Olive Fadali. She worked with Lewis to start Pride Place, establishing it as a new residential learning program instead of gender nonspecific housing. They both plan to live there when it opens in the fall.
I want it to be a family, to be a group of people who all really care about each other and really support one another.
Lewis says the ban on gender nonspecific housing won't keep Pride Place from being a positive place.
There's no reason for you to include people in your life who are not going to support you. So having a safe space to come home to at night, that's really fantastic, but also just in your day-to-day relationships.
In Chapel Hill, I'm Madison Cavalcari.
No, this isn't gender non-specific housing. It's themed housing for anyone who identifies as LGBTQ. Roommates still must live with someone of the same assigned sex at birth.
A funeral for over 300 people. Aaron Wygant tells us how the old Chapel Hill Cemetery laid to rest a wrongful past.
University legends like Bill Friday and Charles Kuralt are remembered by their headstones in the old cemetery. But lately, community members are concerned with what has been forgotten, including longtime Chapel Hill resident Stanley Peel.
So I've even played with this over here as a child. I didn't know what all this was. I didn't even know it was a graveyard.
He didn't know it was a graveyard because there were no headstones or markers, just a field of scattered rocks. Established in the 1700s, the cemetery was segregated.
White, white, and black. Look at the difference.
But the African American section was unmarked and nearly forgotten.
I thought, nobody's doing anything.
He contacted Sherry Skidrowski, the director of Preservation Chapel Hill. Together with a team of excavators and geologists, they set out to identify the graves.
They'd used two different types of study. One was ground penetrating radar, which is the lawnmower type machine.
The device sent radar waves into the ground to identify where the earth had been disturbed, presumably where there was a grave. Skidrowski pushed the lightweight cart through the rocky graveyard and says the cemetery's history weighed heavily on her mind.
The emotional weight of what you're doing doesn't really match the physical activity.
Peel also felt the emotional weight. A tear rolled down his cheek when he read his words reflected on a new monument.
Here rest in honored glory 361 American persons of color known but to God, which makes me kind of cry.
Although it acknowledges the forgotten graves with a specific number, Peel says it stands for something much larger.
It's setting a little bit right something that was wrong for centuries.
And he hopes the plaque will stand for centuries to come. In Chapel Hill, I'm Erin Wygant.
The marker was unveiled this month, and it stands off the main road into the cemetery.
In 2012, the FDA found a major cheese manufacturer was selling Parmesan cheese that didn't contain any actual Parmesan. Instead, they used cheaper cheese and wood pulp. So what are we eating, and are we being fooled?
Isn't that beautiful, though?
That's Greg Overbeck. He owns 411 West, a local Italian restaurant. They only use freshly grated Parmesan cheese. But why?
Well, it's a pretty simple answer. It tastes the best.
According to a recent study by Bloomberg Business, freshly grated Parmesan might not only taste the best, but also be the best. The study tested various brands of packaged Parmesan cheese, finding that Kraft brands had nearly 4% cellulose. Walmart's Great Value had nearly 8%, and other brands had nearly 9%. The FDA limit is 2 to 4%. But cellulose is also found in lots of other foods. Foods such as Eggo waffles, Kraft mac and cheese, and Jimmy Dean's breakfast bowls. The list goes on. Cellulose, sometimes called wood pulp because manufacturers grind up wood to extract it. So is what we're eating safe? Beth Mayer Davis is the chair of UNC's nutrition department. She says that extra sprinkle of cheese won't harm a thing.
Not a health threat.
But she says people have a right to know.
You wouldn't naturally find cellulose in Parmesan cheese, and so the consumer, oftentimes simply wants to know what is it that they're purchasing, what is it that they're eating. And in this situation, there was an excess.
An excess that will keep Overbeck from using store-bought Parmesan.
It's just nasty.
In Chapel Hill, I'm CB Cotton reporting. Now I reached out to Kraft and Great Value about their Parmesan cheese components. Well, they declined to comment.
One case of the Zika virus confirmed in North Carolina. Are you at risk?
Medical reporter Ben Smart joins us live in the studio to address common concerns about this very deadly disease.
Rare chronic illnesses affect over 25 million Americans. These illnesses are often misdiagnosed and passed off as psychological issues. Gayatri Rathod reports.
Cassidy Celeste, cheerleader and theater performer, had a normal high school life. So when she got sick one week, doctors thought it was a simple virus.
It was a mystery virus. They couldn't figure out what it was. And so we kind of expected it would get better.
But it got worse. After just weeks, Cassidy's heart rate shot up. She fainted frequently and struggled through her daily routine.
One really embarrassing week, I barely even remember. I couldn't even wash my hair or bathe myself at all.
After 4 long years of being passed from one doctor to the next, Cassidy was diagnosed with an illness called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS. UNC Hospital's chief of cardiology, Rick Stauffer, says the illness isn't easy to identify.
POTS is not as well understood or defined as a lot of syndromes. It's not like there's a blood test or an imaging test which says this patient has POTS, and that can be frustrating.
POTS is caused by defects in the nervous system. Blood collects in Cassidy's arms and legs, dropping her blood pressure to dangerously low levels. In your doctor's office, it's important to find someone who trusts and listens to you. In patients of chronic illness like Cassidy, this wasn't always the case.
Because people didn't understand, it was kind of just passed off as being in my head. But they don't really listen a lot of the time. They think they know better, and it's frustrating.
Studies estimate that POTS affects between 1 million and 3 million Americans. 83% of POTS patients were given a psychological misdiagnosis. 59% were told that their symptoms were all in their head.
Most patients want someone who's going to listen to them, who's someone who's a partner in their health, and I think in chronic illness, those become even more important.
POTS has paralyzed Cassidy's digestive system. She doesn't eat food, but rather takes in formula through her abdomen. She takes medications for muscle spasms 3 to 6 times a day and often has to use a wheelchair.
The things that I once took for granted were kind of just like taken away from me.
In Raleigh, I'm Gayatri Rathod reporting.
Now a pre-medical student at NC State University, Cassidy strives to raise awareness for patients of chronic illness and hopes to get better soon.
Now, we've heard a lot about the Zika virus. It seems scary, folks. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has increased its Emergency Operations Center to Level 1. Joining us now to explain is medical reporter Ben Smart. Ben, at a Level 1 threat, how dangerous is this virus?
Well, CB, a Level 1 threat is the highest possible emergency alert from the CDC. Just to give you an idea, earlier this month, President Obama officially requested $1.8 billion in emergency funds for education and vaccine development. The danger from the virus really depends on where you are in the world and whether you're pregnant or sexually active. Let's break it down. The Zika virus is spread person to person through mosquito bites. That's the same way as yellow fever and dengue through the same mosquito called Aedes aegypti. Research shows this virus is primarily found in tropical and subtropical areas, which does include Florida, Gulf Coast states, and Hawaii in the USA. But as of today, the CDC is saying Zika-infected mosquitoes have only been found in Latin and South America. To keep from getting bitten in the first place, the CDC recommends using a repellent with DEET and wearing long-sleeved clothing. There are 82 confirmed cases of Zika virus in people from the U.S. All of these are what's called travel-associated cases, meaning they're people traveling out of the country when they were bit by the mosquito and sickened. Friday, health officials discovered the first travel-associated case of Zika right here in North Carolina. Zika virus can spread from a pregnant woman to her baby through the placenta and can cause birth defects, including microcephaly. That's a condition where a baby has an abnormally small head.
Now, Ben, all of this sounds very alarming. Can you tell me what are some of the symptoms of the Zika virus?
Sure. So actually, only 1 in 5 people who get Zika have symptoms, which can include joint pain, rash, fever, and red eyes. And the difficult thing here is that Zika virus, the test is not widely distributed, so it's difficult to confirm a case of Zika virus.
Now, has anyone died from Zika yet?
Actually, no. No one has died yet. It's not that serious. But I just want to reinforce again, the danger is for women who are pregnant or planning to become pregnant. If you don't fall in that category, then you aren't facing as much of a risk.
Great info, Ben. Ben Smart, thank you for joining us this morning.
You got it.
This week's weather had us feeling like we weren't in Kansas anymore.
David Dixon tells us what we can expect looking ahead.
Good morning, North Carolina. I'm meteorologist David Dixon. It's a beautiful day outside, and it's going to be an even better weekend. So if you don't have any plans for all of this blue sky, go ahead and make some. Go outside, take a walk, do something, because it's begging, really begging for you to take a walk outside. Very warm temperatures today, 52 degrees, and this is going to be a start of a warm-up to temperatures starting off next week near 70 degrees. And I'm honestly looking forward to the warm conditions, and look at what else. Very light winds, no more gusty winds. And so this is going to be a start of a beautiful weekend that continues into Sunday. But starting off, you probably notice it's fairly cold this morning. Temperatures starting off below freezing, starting at 7 a.m., but right now it's warmed up above freezing, and this trend of warming is even going to continue into the later afternoon, peaking up at 3 o'clock with temperatures in the lower 50s. All of this is due to a high pressure system located in the Gulf of Mexico, bringing us some clear skies as air descends and just brings us those clear conditions. No rain really anywhere in the United States. That line of storms is way out into the Atlantic that we saw on Wednesday. And I want you to take a look at this next map. So meteorologists look at this map. This is 500 millibars, so this is way up in the atmosphere, about 5 kilometers. And we use this to see how events, weather up here impact the surface. And so we're looking at large-scale troughs and ridges. And right now, North Carolina is centered in a trough. And usually this would mean some energy that can bring up clouds or start precipitation. And we can actually see that in the shading, but the air is simply too dry, so all that we'll really see for today is just some increased cloud cover, maybe in the late afternoon, but it's not going to really ruin your sunny day. For tonight, low dropping near freezing, and it's going to remain chilly into tomorrow, but then that warm-up begins with much nicer conditions. Again, very light winds, nothing gusty, as the pressures are just not close enough. Looking back up high in the atmosphere, you can see that that trough has moved off into the Atlantic, so we're not going to get anything in terms of precipitation or cloudiness for the rest of the week, and we're in this large-scale ridge that brings us more sinking air and more clear, warm conditions. And so with that, I think it's going to be an absolutely beautiful weekend. And so for tomorrow's surface map, I really don't see any rain throughout most of the country. Now, looking further back, there is some rain that we're going to be looking at, and for Wednesday's forecast, you can see that rain chance. But for the rest of the week and into this weekend, it looks to be pretty beautiful. Temperatures jumping up Sunday and starting off your week with temperatures up in the lower 70s. It's beginning to start to look like spring, and we really don't see these temperatures that often this early.
You were telling me everything I wanted to hear. My body is in desperate need of a thaw out.
Yes, I am so tired of having to bundle up in a jacket and a scarf. I'm ready for that, like, some flip-flops, y'all, flip-flops. Thanks so much, David.
Of course.
Throwing touchdowns and draining threes.
We'll show you how a new football recruit plans to dominate the field and the court.
Welcome back to Wake Up Carolina. I'm Jordan Black with sports. Roy's boys managed to remain on top of the ACC standings with a win over NC, not our rival state, on Wednesday. It wasn't so pretty in the beginning. Heels trailing by 10 here as Cat Barber dominates for the Pack. He finished with 32 points, but once the Heels found their rhythm, they were unstoppable. Justin Jackson ended the game with 17 points, his 5th double-digit performance in a row. And while Jackson scored 17 points, Bryce Johnson got his 17th double-double of the season. We should just expect this at this point. He had 22 points and 11 boards. Building huge leads like this and stretching them out, this is exactly what we need to see if the Heels want to make a long tournament run in March. Now the Heels travel to Charlottesville tomorrow to take on the Cavs at UVA, who are 10-5 in the ACC. From baskets to baseballs, the number 10 Tar Heel baseball team took on the number 11 Oklahoma State Cowboys yesterday and continue through this weekend. They went into going into a win today, coming off a walk-off win yesterday, 2-1, and hope to take home the series this weekend. Now, one Carolina athlete won't be taking on just one sport. Paige Hopkins caught up with the future star Tar Heel.
Most college athletes spend countless hours each week perfecting their craft. And that's not counting the few brave enough to take on 2 college-level sports teams and success in the classroom. Denver, North Carolina native Chaz Surratt is one of those few.
Yeah, football is my favorite. That's my first love, football.
But he has hopes to play basketball as well. Currently, Surratt is a senior quarterback and point guard at East Lincoln High School. Soon after graduation, he'll head to Chapel Hill to play football and then basketball. His future coach, Larry Fedora, doesn't mind coaching 2-sport athletes. He actually prefers it.
I mean, if you ask me, would I rather have a 1-sport athlete or a 2-sport athlete, I'll take the 2-sport athlete every time.
And according to his coach, Neil Hodges, this 2-sport athlete has an impressive work ethic.
he's the kind of kid that everybody needs to recruit. Hey, he's the total deal. He understands and socially and academically, great addition to Chapel Hill.
But before that new addition makes it to Chapel Hill, he has unfinished business to take care of in his hometown.
I didn't want to leave my teammates. We got a state championship to win. We came up short last year, and, that was a goal, and I just didn't want to leave them. I think we got a shot to win it this year, so I just wanted to pursue that.
Win or lose, North Carolina will gain a talented quarterback, point guard, and student in 2016. From Chapel Hill, I'm Paige Hopkins reporting.
Now, Surratt won't come to campus for a few more months, but when he comes, he definitely has some high expectations to live up to. Early wake-up calls and chilly temperatures, they can't stop the Carolina football team from getting in a good workout. Blue Dawn is upon us. The annual 6 a.m. workouts before spring practice include relays, tire pools, and sled races. Teams are organized by color and they move through 8 stations each day. Now, the team just completed day 5 of the workouts led by strength and conditioning coach Lou Hernandez and finished the competition on Tuesday. So guys, I went to Blue Dawn yesterday. Waking up to be somewhere at 6 a.m. for one day, I think I need 5 days to catch up. I don't know how these boys are doing it 8 days in a row.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I can barely get like 5 hours of sleep with just my classes. I seriously don't know how they do it.
But that's the type of dedication I like to see, and I hope it leads to an entertaining spring football game.
I'm with ya. I'm with ya.
I wanna be the very best.
Gotta catch 'em all. Is that a blast from the past or what? No, Pokemon aren't just a thing of your childhood. They're still around and celebrating a huge milestone. Stay tuned. A huge part of pop culture in the United States began in Japan 20 years ago. It's Pokemon's birthday.
I'm so excited. Luis Fernandez checked in on the franchise and learned it's not just kids who want to catch them all.
After a long day of classes, senior Ryan Griffin makes his way into his room, sets his backpack down, gets comfortable, and reaches for a familiar friend. That's right, Pokémon. The Nintendo staple has been a part of video gaming vernacular for almost 20 years. Griffin remembers the first time he played.
I remember my parents brought home this big plastic package with a Game Boy Color, Pokemon Blue, the guidebook, and a little book-light extension, and I was ecstatic.
It's a pretty simple game. You catch, befriend, and train powerful creatures known as Pokémon. And then you battle friends and rivals to find out who's the ultimate Pokemon master.
I wanna be the very best.
Pikachu and his buddies at the Pokemon Company make a staggering $1.5 billion a year.
Pikachu!
Just kept picking up the games, kept playing them. When I got to college, that's when a lot of people break out their old stuff and try to relive their childhoods.
2016 marks the 20th anniversary of the franchise. They're celebrating with giveaways, new games, even a Super Bowl commercial. Not only is it fun for gamers, there could be positive health effects too. Doctors from schools of medicine across the country have said video games can reduce chronic pain and anxiety. Griffin says no matter how old he is, Pokemon will always have a place in his heart.
Sure, it's marketed to kids, but you'll still always love it. We'll grow into our 90s remembering that Pokemon was there for us at age 5.
In Chapel Hill, I'm Luis Fernandez reporting.
Griffin says his favorite Pokemon is Dragonite, and I think my favorite character now might be reporter Luis Fernandez. Did you see him in that video game?
I know. I have to say, Luis, you look really great, in the game. I want to know if you won or not.
Almost cuter than Jigglypuff.
I'm not going to give Luis that. Sorry.
Well, happy birthday, Pokemon, and thanks so much for joining us on this very first edition of Wake Up Carolina.
We'll be waking up with you next week.